Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the last Benedict Institute Lunch and Learn of the academic year. My name is Roger Narlock, and I'm director of the Benedict Institute. And on behalf of both Jesse Bazan, the associate director, and Catherine Rupp, our administrative assistant, we want to thank you for being with us throughout our talks this year. It's so nice to see so many repeat customers. We take this as a sign that you have enjoyed both the topics as well as the community meal. One note, if you have any suggestions for future Lunch and Learn speakers or topics, we're always open to brainstorming who to ask and what sorts of things to have people talk about. So please do not hesitate contacting either Catherine, Jesse, or myself at the Benedict Institute in giving us a suggestion. I will introduce today's speaker in just a minute, but first I invite Jesse Bazan, the Associate Director of the Benedict Institute, to lead us in a prayer.
And let us pray. God of wisdom, you have called forth leaders throughout time to shepherd your people. We give you thanks in particular today for the callings of Abbot Douglas and the monks of St. John's Abbey. Inspired by the community's careful discernment of their new abbot, grant each of us the gifts of listening, humility, and courage, so that we too may serve our communities like Christ. We offer this prayer in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Jesse. We are delighted to have with us today Abbot Douglas Mullin. Douglas grew up in suburban Twin Cities, Bloomington in particular. He began his candidacy at St. John's Abbey in 1978 and made first vows in 1979. Douglas earned a bachelor's degree in elementary education from St. John's, a master's in religious education from the School of Theology, a master's in school administration from St. Thomas, and a doctorate in educational leadership from University of Minnesota. Also, after living as a monk for 25 years, Douglas was called to enter seminary and thereby received a Master's of Divinity and was ordained a priest in 2007. Douglas has served in many roles throughout these years, both within the university, within the Abbey, and elsewhere. He worked for 7 years at the prep school in teaching and then in administration. Within the university, he was a tenured associate professor in the education department. He was vice president of student development, as well as a corporate member of the university. Within the Abbey, he has been assistant to the novice master, sub-prior, assistant vocation director, member of the senior council, and now, of course, abbot. Also, outside of these places, he spent 7 years living and working at St. Mary's Mission on Red Lake Reservation and served for a while as chaplain of the VA in St. Cloud. Now, whenever I advise students, I always remind them that as much as they might want to, they cannot fully plan out the path of their lives or even predict unforeseen directions to which they'll be called. And Douglas's path, I think, is a testament to this statement. But rather than viewing any of those things as tangents or mistakes, Abbot Douglas remarks, and I quote, "I have always had the best job in the world until the next one came along." So join me in welcoming Abbot Douglas to talk about his vocational journey to becoming the 11th abbot of St. John's Abbey.
Make sure we're turned on here. I hope everybody can hear. Thank you, Roger. Thank you all for being here today. So I'm really here to just kind of lay out my story. The big question is, who is this Abbot Douglas? Known a lot of people in a lot of different positions, places, and so on, but I haven't always been a big profile person. Frankly, I'm still not a big profile person by personality. But I think the story of how I came to St. John's and eventually got to the position I'm at is a story worth telling. So I grew up in a family of 7 kids. I was the oldest of 7 kids. Actually born in Texas, right after my father finished high school, Bloomington High School graduate of 1952. He entered the Air Force, was stationed in Laredo, Texas, came back after a year on a leave to marry my mother, brought her down. I was the first one born a year later. And after his time in the Air Force, 4 years, moved back to Minnesota and in Bloomington where I grew up. So I said I was the oldest of 7 kids, and at that time, our family was considered a mixed marriage. My father was Irish Catholic and my mother was German Catholic. And so I picked up some traits from both sides and all of this type of thing. But anyway, so I grew up fine there. Things were going well. But when I was a freshman in high school, our mother died. And there was a lot of pressure around some of what I called the good church ladies felt that our family needed to be split up because a man could not take care of 7 kids. So I became the homemaker to make things work and pull things together. And you know, we got by. Things worked out pretty well. I learned how to cook, learned how to clean, do laundry, this type of thing, get people organized. All that type of thing went forward, and we were doing fairly well. But I realized that I could not do this the rest of my life. I needed to get out of there. As much as I loved the family and everything, there were other people that were growing up in the family and they were going to do things. So I decided the best way to do this would be to go to college, figure out what my life was going to be. Now the challenge in all of this is I was a first-generation college student. Either my parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, no one had ever been to college before. So how do you choose a college? Where do you go? How do you know what to do and whatnot? Well, I had no idea how to choose a college. I didn't know the difference between a bachelor's degree, an associate degree, or master's degree. Didn't know any of that stuff. But we had a college fair at my high school, Bloomington Jefferson. And so I told my dad we needed to go up there and find out about colleges. And colleges, I knew the criteria that I had to consider. Number 1, I wanted to get away from home. Number 2, cost was going to be a huge issue. Number 3, a 4-year college sounded better than a 2-year college. So with that in mind, we went up and down the rows, looked at the various colleges, and I chose the one college that would meet all that criteria and be the lowest price school. So I applied to Bemidji State and was accepted. And figured all was well. I had life planned out. I could get away from school at the end of summer. And the fact that it was on a lake and in the woods made it all the more attractive to me. So I'm sitting in the library one day in the spring of the year, and my junior year world history teacher, who was a staunch Lutheran graduate from St. Olaf, asked me where I was going to college, and I proudly told him Bemidji State, and he looked me straight in the eye and says, "No, you belong at St. John's." Where did that come from? Well, I said, well, that's a private school. They're too expensive. Didn't even look at private schools. Well, you'd probably get financial aid. I said, well, how was I supposed to know that? And he said, well, didn't you talk to the school counselor? I said, what for? I'm not in trouble. I didn't even know you could talk to a counselor if you weren't in trouble. That's how naive I was about things. So anyway, he introduced me to the counselor, and she had information, all looked good, and lots of woods, lots of lakes and everything. And so I applied for financial aid. The thought of making a visit, nobody ever told me to do that type of thing, so it was just looking at pictures. And so I applied and was accepted, and the financial aid package came, and it was going to be the same price, St. John's or Bemidji State. What the heck? Let's go to St. John's then. And Mr. Chase was right, I belonged at St. John's. So I came up here, had the time of my life getting into college. Lived in Tommy Hall for 3 years. That was before when people stuck around for quite a bit. Father Rene was my faculty resident freshman year. Father Don was my faculty resident sophomore and junior years. Lived off campus senior year because I was doing student teaching. While at St. John's, I found myself, my life, my passions. I loved working with kids. This was probably something that had developed me at home, and so that just kind of carried over and whatnot. And I settled in that I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And this was the passion of my life, and I was very excited about all that. I was involved in professional groups and all this type of thing. And got my dream teaching position in St. Cloud at what was at that time called St. Peter, Paul, and Michael School, primary school. I was in the 4th grade, and really loved it. And got into it, and it was everything I hoped it would be, but somehow my life felt empty. Something was not quite right. And so I found myself coming back to campus here, walking in the woods, sitting by the lake, praying in the church, talking to people. Something about this place was drawing me back. And finally I began to ask myself, so why do I keep coming back to St. John's with these questions? Well, St. John's is the place where everything came to make sense for me of who I am, what my passions are, what I'm called to do and be. St. John's is the place in all the world that I am most at home. And that's it. I was missing home. I was homesick. That can't be the case, of course, I told myself. St. John's was college. I finished with college. But that name felt right. It was missing home by not being at St. John's. So with that, I began to make contact. I recognized, of course, it is home for the monks. So I began to talk with various monks and met the vocation director, who's introduced himself as Father Baldwin. He did not tell me he was retired Abbot Baldwin, but he was Father Baldwin. And we had met a couple of times. I was teaching in St. Cloud, came in to meet him, and he says, well, if we're going to do this, we got to get you going through the admission process. And I said, well, I'm not sure that I'm quite ready for all this. And he says, well, you go home and pray about it, come back next week, and then we'll get it moving. So I prayed about it, came back the next week, and I said, you know, Father Baldwin, I'm definitely not ready for this. What's going on, he says. I said, well, first of all, got some issues I got to sort out. I said, my dad had just remarried at the end of my junior year of college. And that marriage was now falling apart. Family was breaking up, just not sure how things were going to be. And he says, well, you know, there's always going to be family issues. You can't let them get in the way of a call from the Lord. I said, it's not getting in the way. It's just something that I need to know that the family is settled and going to be okay before we do anything. Well, I think you're throwing away your vocation. What else is happening? I said, well, I've got a little bit of debt from college I need to pay back. Oh, don't worry about that, he says. As long as you're here, you're going to be working, so we'll pay on your loans as long as you stay. And I said, you know, that doesn't work so well for me. I really need to know that I'm staying for the right reason and not staying just so you're paying the loans. So if I take care of that, then it'll be okay. So you let money get in the way of your vocation, he says. I said, no, and that's the reason I'm not going to come at this time. Well, what else is it? I said, well, I just got started in teaching. I love it. I think I'm pretty good at it, but I think I need to prove to myself, number one, that I can make it in the world. Number two, that I've got something to bring to the monastery. And if things don't work out, I've got something I can go back to. Well, how long is that going to take, he says. I said, I've got a 2-year license. I think I should teach for another year. Okay, but I think you're throwing away your vocation. I said, I'll be back next year. Called him back the next year. He said he was no longer vocation director, and he introduced me to Father Julian, who was, and this was a great thing. Going through things, and things had kind of settled into place. And then Julian says to me, now, we've got to get this moving, but I'm a little bit embarrassed to say I'm going to have to ask you to fill out your application form again. Well, no problem, but why? Well, the previous vocation director said you were a lost cause, so we threw away your file. So after all these years, this lost cause is standing before you. And in point of fact, when I was elected abbot, the abbot who was presiding over the election, he selected one of the crosses that we have and put it on me. It turned out to be the cross that Abbot Baldwin wore. So there it is. Things turn around. There we go. So anyway, coming into monastic life, not always easy, but I knew it was the right place, and really wanted to be, I felt really good about being a part of this. Oh, one thing I got to tell you about going through the admission process. So you meet with 5 different people and so on, kind of tell your story, and they're asking questions about it. And I remember one of the monks, Brother Linus, who was on the admission committee at that time, said, so what other monasteries have you visited? And I said, well, none. He said, well, you really need to check other places out, you know. Monastic life is lived differently in every place. And, you know, you've been to one monastery, you've only been to one monastery. So just as you probably shouldn't marry the first girl that you meet, you shouldn't go enter the first monastery that you come to. And I was really naive, and I don't know why they let me in, but I said, to be perfectly honest, I have no interest in monastic life. I'm interested in St. John's. And if that means learning about monastic life, I'll learn about it here. Well, they let me in anyway, and I did stick around. As I said, going forward, there's been lots of education. It's been a wonderful time. I was told by Abbot Jerome that I was the first monk in the history of St. John's to request to go to Red Lake. And I had done that after a visit up there during my novitiate year. Our class went up there and whatnot. So much of it was attractive to me. Number one, the opportunity to meet and be immersed in a new culture. And there was so much to learn. And it's particularly the idea that it's a communal culture. Monastic life is also communal, to have a dialogue between the different cultures, Ojibwe and the monastic culture. Was a good thing. I also had some personal issues. I love St. John's, but I was questioning myself if I was attracted to St. John's for the wrong reasons. Wrong reasons? This is a very comfortable place. It's a place where there's many opportunities and much richness, but was it really the community that was sustaining me, or was it the niceness of the place, the nice meals that we have, the intellectual opportunities that we have? All that was there. So I needed to be in a place where it was community that would support, and faith and prayer and being there. The fact that it was 2 communities of Benedictines, sisters and monks, working together as well as within the community was a very attractive thing. And it was a 7-year experience and experiment, I think, for me that was really very rich, and I'm very grateful for that time. As Roger said, I believed I had the best job in all the world. While I was there, however, that's when I did the master's degree at St. Thomas during the summertime, and really loved the idea of going to school during the summertime and then being able to apply ideas in the school where I was working. It really became a wonderful laboratory. So I taught for 4 years, and I was principal for 3 years up there before coming home. I remember after I graduated from St. Thomas, and Abbot Jerome came up for a visit and whatnot and congratulated me on finishing the degree and all this type of thing. And he says to me, so what would you like to do next? He says, well, you know, I said, I'd really like to get a doctorate. He said, oh, that'll be great. You let me know when you're ready to move out of here and start working in the university, and then we can do that. And I said, well, why would I want to leave this and start working in the university just because I'm going to get a doctorate? He said, well, you don't need a doctorate to be here. I said, well, I know I don't need one, but what about learning, the goal of becoming fulfilled and with developing yourself and all this type of thing? He said, real wake-up call, Doug, this is not about you. Education is an investment. And if we're not going to use that investment, there's no point in investing. So there it is. Aha, the world does not revolve around me. That was an important lesson. So ended up coming back here, working in the prep school, did a year of teaching, did a feasibility study for starting the middle school, and then moved into administration. A pattern is beginning to emerge. Teach and then go into administration. So I was at the prep school for a total of 7 years, and final years serving as Dean of Students and Director of Residential Life, living in the dorms and all this type of thing. And then during my last 2 years there, I started working on the doctorate at the University of Minnesota. Again, working full-time while going to school full-time in the summertime, taking a course during the quarter system at that time. This was a great way for me to be enriched and engaged the whole time. I really liked that. And then as this was happening, Abbot Timothy started to move me forward towards teaching in the education department. After I left the prep school, I took a year to finish the dissertation, which ended up having to be finished much sooner than a year because people from my committee were leaving, so got it done. I remember taking my third chapter to my advisor the day after Thanksgiving, and he says, it's looking good and everything. My plan was to have the whole thing finished by May, and he says, well, if you're really planning to do this, we're going to have to move it up your timeline a bit because some of your committee members are going to be leaving for study abroad beginning in February. So we're going to have it turned in and your defense done by the end of January. So this was the day after Thanksgiving. I brought it to him, I think January 6th or something like that. And I said, I just want you to know I dedicated the last chapter to you. I call it How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Well, he said, fine, Doug, you dedicate that to me, but I know you're a monk and it's the resurrection that you're looking forward to. So that's what will be coming. So everything happened in time, and I started teaching the education department and became department chair, this type of thing. Important thing that happened in 1997, the same year that I started in the education department, I also, Abbot Timothy asked me to serve as sub-prior in the monastery, which is the number 3 person in order. And he said his term of office goes until the year 2000, so it was a 3-year term that he was asking me to take. Usually you do a 3-year term and then a second one if things are going well. So anyway, he said, I just want you to agree to do it through these 3 years that I'm in office. So I had agreed to do that, and then we elected Abbot John, so turned in resignations, and he reappointed us all. Then fine, waited until the school year was over and went to have a heart-to-heart talk with him. And at that time I told him, I really did want to resign from being sub-prior. He says, well, really need you, let's stick together in this, you're doing important things, blah, 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 blah. I said, look, year 2000, I began as department chair. Now, I was the junior faculty member in the department. When a junior faculty member becomes a department chair, it tells you something's not quite right. And what was wrong is we had failed in accreditation in the education department. And I was seen to be the person to pull things together and get us back on track. Meanwhile, I said, we're dealing with sexual abuse stuff here. I go to work in the morning, I got a mess. I come home at night, I've got a mess. I'm going to burn myself out if all I'm dealing with is the messes of this place. He said, well, what can we do to support you? We really want you to stick on and help us out through all this. So I said, tell you what, I'll stay on for another 3-year term. At that time, 2003, if all goes according to plan, I should get tenure, promotion, sabbatical. I'd like to have a real sabbatical, refocus my life on why I'm here, and never have to go into administration again. He said, it's a deal. But there's one more thing I want you to do. What's that? I'd like you to be ordained a priest. Wow, where'd that come from? So bottom line was I went back to him about a month later saying, you know, I really want to take you seriously in all this, but you know, I need to understand why you're asking me to do this. And he says, well, you know, that's fine, but I said also, I need you to understand how I discerned 20 years ago that I should not be doing this. Okay, he says, well, you go first. So I said, well, first of all, I truly believe there is only one valid reason for being ordained, and that is to be of service to Christ and the church. Nothing else matters. Prestige, authority, power, favors, privileges, none of that matters. And frankly, it bothers me when I see some of our own monks who are seeking ordination who say that they don't want to go to a parish. It seems to me if you're going to be of service to Christ and the church, you go where you're needed. Then I look at myself. I came to the monastery to live community life. I never wanted to go to a parish. I'm an educator. I see my home here, both my work and in my life. And he says, Doug, I have no intention of sending you to a parish. Well, then the question comes down, how do you use the gift of ordination to be of service to Christ and the church if you're not going to go to a parish? One of the ways is to help weekend assistants going to parish on weekends. Said again, it bothers me when I hear this, but by and large, he says in response, you know, I really enjoyed going out on weekends, but I think you would enjoy it too, but I'm not asking you to do this so I can send you out for weekend assistance. Well, then the last way in which I could see this gift being used is to serve on campus as a priest for the Abbey, the university prep school, St. Ben's, helping out around here. And I said, you know, we have a richness in our community that I don't think is healthy. What do you mean? I said, at that time, we have so many priests in our community, we could have a different presider for Eucharist every day for 3 months without repeating. People on the outside are saying, what are you doing with all those priests at St. John's when we need them in parishes? They don't say anything about us brothers. They don't understand us. We're living monastic life and we're doing what we came for. On the other hand, when we hear that people asking what you're doing with all those priests, and then we say that's not our problem. I don't think that's healthy for us. The church's problems are our problems. But by ordaining priests, it seems to me we're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem because the church is refusing to recognize the people who God is calling to ordination. And there's all kinds of discussion on where that is. But he says, you know, again, your point is well taken, but you're missing one important consideration. Well, what's that? Those priests are 20 years older. We need somebody younger ordained. He says, well, I said, with all due respect, I'm not young anymore. I'm approaching 50 at that point. And he says, but you're still in the youngest half of the community, and you will be for another 20 years. This is now 20 years, 24 years, in fact. So anyway, bottom line was I accepted to go to seminary, and all that came forward. I got tenure, promotion, sabbatical, went forward, got into education, returned to that, became vice president in 2008, a year after ordination. Again, the best job in the world, working with Mary, wherever she went. There she was. It was a great time. And then 2019, timing was perfect because I didn't know it, that COVID was coming. But it was a great time to move on to what I considered was going to be my retirement career at the St. Cloud VA. Absolutely loved it out there. It was great to have a 5-day-a-week job, 8 hours a day, holidays paid and time off. You know, those were all great benefits for me that I had never experienced before. So I really enjoyed all that and thought I was set for life until the election came along. We've been going through discernment and all this type of thing. And then at the election itself, every monk is supposed to nominate 2 people on a written ballot, and the names are called off. And I was thrilled that over 20 people were nominated. But there was a disparity. There were some who were really at the upper end of the nomination who had received ballots and whatnot, nominations. So at that point, they took the people who had received 10 nominations or more, and we're going to do a scrutinium. You'll leave as your name is called, and they discuss you, strengths, weaknesses, what is going on, and so on. And we kind of went through that list and called us back after each one. And then the next day, we started with the first ballot. And that was really scary because name after name called off as they're reading the ballots. My name was called off. On the first day of balloting, you had to have a 2/3 majority. And we went way over the 2/3. So my life changed around. People were very supportive and everything. My first question was, where am I going to stay tonight? I had to resign my positions and everything changed. So kind of getting to the end of this time, but I would just say that it's been marvelous support that has come forward, but I've also interpreted from all of this that while as wonderful as it is to have the strength and support of the community and that unity that's there that is hardly ever seen, it also gives me a mandate, which is to raise up leadership within the community so people can see others besides myself. And so that is what my primary goal is to raise up leadership in the community. Any questions? I used up a little more than my time, but I want to keep it close there. Yeah.
When did you work at St. Peter, Paul, and Michael's? Like, do you remember the year?
Yes, 76 to 78.
Never mind. I wasn't even born. Sorry. I met work there. That's why I'm curious. Sorry.
Tom.
Abbot Douglas, what was it like? I was in Texas the day that the monastery had the vote. What's it like waking up in the morning, going to prayer, you're a brother monk, and all of a sudden at 10 o'clock in the morning, you're going to be installed as abbot, and there's a special mass with the present abbot and the bishop, and I just think that this is the only place in the world something like that could happen.
Yeah, well, it was amazing. It was, like I said, not what I planned for. Some people had talked with me the night before and said, you know, it's really looking pretty like it's going to be you. And I said, my knees are feeling very weak right now. There was one person who had asked, or actually there were a couple people that asked if they could nominate me. I thought that earlier on we didn't know the process, that it would be written nominations. And I said no to everyone who asked me if they could be nominated. I said, you know, I'm really not seeking this. And I think we've got other highly qualified people. So, but when it landed where it was a matter of, for me, do I believe this is truly the Lord calling? And and that it is, then I got to go. So here I am, Lord. Thank you.
What a gift that you answered that call. Thank you, Abbot Douglas. Wonderful. Just a few quick announcements before we head out. First, the Association of Benedictine Colleges and Universities annual conference, along with the Benedictine Pedagogy Conference, they're both happening at St. Ben's this summer. So mark your calendars, it's June 24th to the 27th. This conference is open to any employee of CSB and SJU. Staff, faculty, administrators, all are welcome, and funding is available through the Benedictine Institute. I know a lot of us are working on different aspects of the strategic plan right now, and this conference will really be a great opportunity to reflect on how we integrate mission into our work. So you can check out the bulletin board for more information on that. Second, the next building community that we have, it will be this Friday in New Science, room 150, from 9 to 10:45. So if you need caffeine, a little conversation, you're welcome to come on by. And then finally, just wanted to say at earlier Lunch and Learns this semester, I'd asked for folks' help in promoting the Benedictine Living and Learning community to our students, and really pleased to share that we had 87 first-year students apply to be part of that community. And I think it's important that we celebrate the real interest that our students have in Benedictine spirituality and in community living. And I know that interest is sparked, no doubt, by you all, right, living that out. So just want to really thank all of you for what you do for this place. And Abbot Doug, thank you again for being with us.